Welcome to the Human Design Profiles and Entrepreneurship Podcast. I'm your host, Chantel, a 1-3 manifesting generator, small business strategist, workshop facilitator, and the author of the Aligned Action series of books for solo entrepreneurs. Thanks for joining us today on the show, which is an active learning experiment on how we all experience entrepreneurship on an individual level while we are satisfying our desire for self-awareness. Each episode profiles a human design enthusiast / business owner who's here to share how their personal profile lines influence their business journey. Today, I'm connecting with Megan, a certified athletic therapist of 10 years with a master's degree in rehabilitation science. Megan helps you break free from the chronic pain and re-injury cycle without wasting time on useless treatments, stretches, and corrective exercises. She's guided over 12,000 athletic therapy and training sessions, spent countless hours on the sidelines at national sports events and games, experienced how life-changing yoga and meditation with sound healing is, published academic research, lectured in universities, is an exam developer for the National Athletic Therapy Board of Certification, writes, teaches, and presents for international continuing education platforms and podcasts, and has blended it all together to create a sweet spot of holistic wellness using movement, mindfulness, and music that empowers you to live freely again. Have a listen while today's guest, Megan, a 3-5, shares her story while you read between the lines. Megan, I read somewhere that for 3-5s, limits do not exist. Does this feel accurate to you? And what is your relationship to the concept of limitations, especially in how you relate to your clients?
Yeah, especially listening to you read that introduction about me, I was like, this is exactly 3-5 and generator of responding and doing a bunch of different things and experimenting and seeing what else is always out there. I think limits are such a funny concept because everyone is so good at making them up based on their own stories and experiences and what other people tell them and believe about themselves. And whether you choose to listen to those stories or make a change is completely on you. And I think the 3-5 really ties into that, being a problem solver and finding solutions.
Definitely. As a 3 line,
Mhm.
do you feel like you are designed to experience change, create change, facilitate change? How does that feel for you?
All of the above. I think I've always had this innate drive for change since starting my business and since starting in the industry because I fell through the cracks in our health system myself in aspects and was always thinking there has to be more out there. Like, this can't be just the one way of how we do things.
Mhm.
And then I kept seeing that pop up with my own clients as well when things didn't follow what the textbook said was supposed to be happening in their rehab and their training and whatever it was. And I inherently was that person who just kept asking questions and was never satisfied with the answers that I was getting. So it was
Mhm.
experiencing change and experimenting with all of these different modalities and approaches. And in hindsight, I imagine partly why I've taken like 50 something courses and went back to school and did my master's is because I wanted to experience more things and experiment with other methods to see what truly worked. And
Mhm.
that was personal and professional, for sure.
Yeah. You can tell even reading your bio that you have a very vast and varied experience, which is super 3 line.
Yeah, it's interesting to look back and zoom out because we're taught to like be in such a bubble of like, this is your scope of practice and this is all that you can do. And again, coming back to limits right there alone, it's like, what if there's the opportunity for more? And what's wrong with trying?
A 3 line certainly does love to try. We have the 3 line in common, you and I.
Oh, amazing.
And I agree with you totally that there's less fear around trying for us than there seems to be for other people.
So much of my business and my practice is trial and error just because we're dealing with humans and nothing is ever set in stone and the same from one person to the next, even if they have the exact same injury or they're the same age or the same sport to return to or whatever it is, everything is going to be different. So knowing that trial and error is just part of it and is okay took so much pressure off for me to be able to just respond to what was happening in that session or in that moment in that season of life.
Do you have any stories of when you've tried something, experienced trial and error within your business, or you use that as a specific strategy with a client?
Yeah, most days I do, to
Hmm.
be honest. Most of my practice right now is dealing with chronic pain. So people who have been experiencing either residual pain from an injury that happened like 6+ months ago, or even sometimes without a traumatic event or anything, their body starts perceiving pain for whatever reason because it's an emotional response. And the really interesting thing about that is when there is no specific cause of injury and, pathology is all good because the quote unquote typical healing time has passed, right? Like a muscle heals in 4 to 8 weeks, and now we're a year out. Why does that whiplash still hurt, right? So, knowing that pathology is not driving a decision, like that just opens so many possibilities in what we can do. Because now we're talking more about the nervous system and dealing with people's fears and beliefs and helping them find ways to do their valued activities again. So, it's all about finding something that works for that specific person. And there are countless things that can get the same result of somebody calming their nervous system to desensitize pain and to feel safe, like physically and emotionally, to go do whatever the activity or exercise is. So, we'll try yoga, we'll try breath work. In the past couple years, I've started incorporating some sound healing into some sessions. For some people, it's cardio, and for some people, it's more structured, like typical gym exercises. And so we get to try all of those things and see what the best thing is for that person.
Hmm.
And sometimes it doesn't work and flare ups happen and they're going to happen. And I've always framed it like that to clients from day one so they know that it's trial and error as well. And then you get to just play basically and see
Right.
what works. And then when it clicks, we go down that path. If they're like, no, meditating is not for me, cool, let's put a TENS machine on you and do some electrical stimulation to calm you down. If they don't have access to that because they can't come into the clinic, then it's okay. Here's a breathwork pattern, or here's yoga, or here's a corrective exercise. So we get to just, yeah, I keep coming back to the word play, which is really
Hmm.
fun.
Yeah, and not a word that most people associate with athletic therapy. It's interesting because most people who are coming to you, I'm guessing, have been on a trial and error journey on their own, but they're probably not feeling super positive about it. And I find as a three line myself, one of my gifts is in showing people that trial and error isn't a bad thing. And it sounds like you do that as well. The unique niche that you've carved out for yourself, you are known for helping clients feel seen and feel heard as they're
Yeah.
reaching their goals. How is that different than the traditional model? And how would you say that your 3-5-ness has influenced you in making this choice?
Yeah, the traditional model of healthcare is that the clinician of whatever modality, doctor, AT, PT, chiro, whoever, is there to fix the injury, fix the disease, fix the illness for the client. And that is a very outdated, antiquated model that assumes a lot of very specific things happen that, like I said before, don't happen when there's a human being with emotions and stress and psychological and spiritual aspects to them. When we're in those traditional medical models, it's very much a checklist and me saying, this is what's wrong with you. This is what I'm going to do with my magic hands to realign things, break up scar tissue, massage things. And like, you need me to do that before it's safe for you to exercise or do the project you're working on or play the sport or things like that. Whereas if you step back and zoom out and take away that I'm in charge mindset, and instead, I think this is where the scientist aspect of the three line and my being a generator, natural ability to respond is that if I can sit there and listen, the client is going to give me all the information that I need to know that it's safe for them physically, structurally to do things, and then to find the right entry point without me forcing them to do something that they're physically, emotionally, mentally not ready to do. Because
Mhm.
most of the time when something's been lingering for a long time and things have like failed you in rehab, fear is the biggest barrier to
Mhm.
getting moving and to doing anything again. So having that space created and then showing them how I am meeting them where they're at, as opposed to me trying to drag them to where I think they should be based on the checklist,
Mhm.
that creates that space for them to explore a little bit more with me, as opposed to just being like, this is what we're going to do, and I'm right, you're wrong. And then
Right.
making them feel worse about themselves.
Right. I imagine there must be a bit of conflict with that though, because as a five line, you are probably experiencing that whole projection field thing where people are
Yeah.
attracted to you to save or to fix them. How do you handle that when that comes up?
Yeah, I have shifted a lot in this in the most recent years. Like at the beginning, I fell into that trap of me fixing and saving people and thinking that they needed me. And in hindsight, I think there was perhaps a combination of me wanting to feel like increase my own self-worth a little bit more and like prove to myself that I was a good therapist.
Mhm.
So creating some of those situations that weren't even really there. And then more recently realizing that my job and how I can best help people is to provide them with options. Fixing or helping them doesn't equate to me telling them what's right or wrong. It's me collecting information and collecting all the data and laying out all of the different ways that they can get to where they want to go or what detours they should expect to take.
Mhm.
And realizing that like I don't have to have the answer right away. And that took so much pressure off for me,
Mhm.
I think, and the client. And I do think some of the expectation for clients is that I'm going to fix things for them because that's what we're told, that's what we believe. And I've yet to run into an issue where a client is hard set on, like, I just need you to tell me what to do, and that's the end of it. They respond better to the options,
Mhm.
in fact. So
Right.
it came full circle, I think, in that sense.
I think you're right that we're evolving into this understanding that being active participants in our own healing journey is really how that all works, anyways, and maybe how it was always meant to work.
And social media, websites, all of the things, people know what they're getting into when they come to see me. Like,
Mhm.
I think if you scroll any of my pages, you'll see very quickly that that's my approach. So perhaps I'm also attracting the people who are more open-minded to that too, versus some of the fixed mindset
That makes a lot of sense.
situations.
So, as a pure generator, you have the emotional solar plexus center either opened or undefined. I'm not sure if you know which one, which means that you have a sacral response. You have a very
Mhm.
clear yes and no. How do you experience that? How does that feel for you? And how do you use it to make aligned decisions in your work and in life in general?
Yeah, I have an undefined solar plexus, which has been a fascinating thing to understand,
Mhm.
especially in combination with I have like defined root and sacral as well. Listening to myself has been a wild experience, I think is the best way to describe it,
Yeah.
because I spent a very long time ignoring those gut feelings or misinterpreting them because I valued other people's opinions more than my own,
Mhm.
or I thought I had to do things the way my mentors did things or the way that I learned in school. And sometimes I was getting caught where, like, this doesn't feel like the right approach for this client, or this doesn't feel like the right way to run my clinical practice, but that's what everyone else is doing. So
Mhm.
I'm probably just anxious because I'm an anxious person and I identified as that a little bit. And I would mix all those feelings up
Right.
and burnt out and was in a job that I didn't like and didn't feel fulfilled by. And then once I stopped numbing those feelings, stopped ignoring them, and started practicing, and like by practicing, I mean putting myself in situations that were so low pressure,
Mhm.
like going to the crystal shop and holding one of each in my hand and be like, which one do I need right now? And then seeing what it felt in my body, or deciding how I was going to order my coffee, and then gradually making like bigger and bigger decisions and tapping into those feelings and separating them out. Then I started realizing, oh, this is what I'm supposed to be doing. And this is what a true yes is for me. And not long after that is when everything became more fulfilling in my life.
That's magical. I so relate to just the little fragment of a sentence, mixed up feelings. I feel like that's just the life of an undefined emotional person. Like, what is this feeling? Is it mine? Is it someone else's? I don't know. Like, always feel
Yeah, and
that.
like then thinking, oh, I'm just an empath, so I'm taking on other people's feelings, and
Right.
I also have an undefined crown. So then getting distracted and overthinking things is also a very common trait. So combo
Mhm.
that with my feelings and somebody else's feelings, like it was just like chaos. And I think my body was just going into this fight or flight mode at times and just overriding
Mhm.
everything else. And then I was like, okay, I'm just anxious, so I'm going to do nothing.
Right.
Versus it's okay to pause and wait and step back and listen to me. And as confidence grew in other areas of my life too, then that started to strengthen.
Confidence is the word I was going to pick out, actually.
Mm.
And I was going to ask you, how long do you think that journey took of beginning to feel confident with that?
Oh, years. It was up very roller coaster, up and down, and being confident in some situations I struggled with because I'm like, well, how come I'm so confident in the clinic and not in my personal life? Like, I'm the same person. What is the difference? And I think the biggest thing for me was that perception of needing to gain somebody else's value clouded it.
Mm.
And in the clinic, I didn't have, friends, parents, relationships, that kind of stuff playing a role. It was just me and the client, versus
Mhm.
outside of those four walls was all of these other dynamics. And so I needed to really create boundaries around every decision I was making
Mhm.
to not let those influences come in. And it annoyed some people because I would leave the room or ask for a week to decide what I was going to do and what the answer was going to be, and had to like really sit in that discomfort of like I should just decide faster because then they'll be happier and everything will be sunshine and rainbows. And then I was like, no, like that's ignoring myself, and how come I don't get to be first? Sometimes I think you have to hit a low for that recognition to come. When that happened, then things snowballed and started to pick up a lot quicker. But
Mhm.
overall, I think it was a few year process.
Yeah, I think a lot of five lines, a lot of generators can relate to
Hmm.
that. Something I'm learning in season two is that boundaries and five lines, it really does go hand in hand. I've had so many conversations with people who have a five, either first or second in their profile, about that journey of boundaries. So I'm learning that that's really a defining experience of the five line.
That's a cool pattern to see.
Yeah, it has been really interesting to note. Okay, thinking of the business side of things, so like not necessarily in clinic, but how you
Hmm.
set everything up. Is there anything that you've done that feels particularly 3-5 that you've intentionally set out to do that way?
Identifying the gaps that I saw in our teaching and in the health system as a whole is what led me to create some of the other projects outside of my clinic that I've been working on, like teaching and working on exam development, and then developing a yoga subscription practice for clients and stuff, because those gaps were what I perceived to be the biggest barrier for clients in getting better. And so then by responding and taking that initiative and finding all of those solutions that exist and the trial and error within my personal practice, I was like, okay, now we can extend this outwards and
Mhm.
get that ripple effect going. And now I can teach this to other therapists. And now I can teach this to clients on a broader scale who aren't in my clinic. And then that's when my brain started going into like, okay, well, how do I fix this from like the top down? Because this is
Yeah.
obviously an industry problem.
Mhm.
And that generator of responding to these gaps is where everything just really pulled together for me in business.
Learning that you were a sacral being who's designed to respond,
Mhm.
what was that realization like? And did that happen before or after you were consciously choosing to do that in addressing gaps?
It was in tandem with it, I think. Like my human design journey really developed about 4 years ago. Like 8 or 10 years ago, I had bought a book and picked it up and put it down, and it would kind of pop up here and there when I was learning more about crystals or sound healing, or then, I'd go on an astrology, oh, I'm an Aries tangent for a while. And with all of those things, I kept coming back to human design. And then I started about 4 years ago really reading the books that I had bought that were sitting on the bookshelf. I was working with a business coach at the time, and he had actually brought up all of our human designs and brought a guest speaker in to teach us about these things. And he was coaching us based on our human design.
Mhm.
And then that's when I was like, oh, I am a responder. And that felt really aligned for me because prior to that, I think I was thinking of all these things that I was doing as people pleasing or taking an easier way out of like, oh, I don't have to create anything then. I can just do something that's already started. And then
Mhm.
if I don't set bigger goals, then I might not fail, in some of those things. So it was like dabbling in all of these, but never really
Right.
committing. And then once I learned more about how my design is to respond, I was like, here we go. Okay, that gave me the reassurance that I was on a path for myself that meant something. So then I was able to really dial it in for the past, yeah, I'd say 4 years for that.
Mhm. Okay. We will flow into our closing ritual for the episodes where I will choose a affirmation card for you. If you're ready, you and I will take a
Mhm.
deep breath in together and let that go. And the card that I've drawn today is I am here to carve my own path, find my own truths, and lead others to theirs. Am I afraid to step up and take this on?
I feel like that's just a summary of that last question that we talked about.
Yeah,
Oh, that's amazing. I love
perfectly
that.
aligned.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. I think that's very accurate to the 3-5 for sure. With the part about being afraid to take something on, that has been a more recent challenge in my broader teaching perspective. I've focused for a very long time on guesting on other people's podcasts and writing articles for other publications and teaching and speaking on as part of other people's programs, and have been sitting on my own program and teaching and coaching opportunity that has had a page living on my website for a couple years. And I promote other people's stuff on social media sometimes more than my own. And
Yeah.
I think that, yeah, that fear of stepping out and doing this as Megan as opposed to being attached to somebody else is a very current challenge for me. So I'm excited to sit with this one for a little bit now.
Absolutely. And you mentioned your website. Can
Mhm.
you tell us where people can connect with you?
Yeah, easiest way is my website, which is www.meganpomarensky.com, or you can find me on social media at Megan Pomarensky as well.